Well, that didn't go according to plan. Welcome back to Raptors Report. We are going to be breaking down the Toronto Raptors opening night loss to the Cleveland Cavaliers 136-106. And there are plenty of takeaways from this game, both good and bad. So if you don't want to be bombarded with bad news, I have added a little sunshine here and there to make sure that the doldrums don't kick in. But why don't we start with bittersweet news? Emmanuel Quickley started really well last game. He had a bunch of three-point shots. He was looking quick, agile, spry, scoring from all over the court, utilizing the pick and roll very well. And he finished with 13 points in only 14 minutes. And the 14 minutes was because he had to leave the game with an injury to his lower back and pelvis in the second quarter when he was undercut, I believe unintentionally, by Darius Garland when he was going up for a rebound. He was walking pretty gingerly, holding his back. Didn't look great. We're still awaiting news on the severity of the injury. Right now, he's tentatively listed as a pelvic contusion, which is a fancy term for a bruise. So hopefully he is not too injured and he can be back for the next game. Cross your fingers, folks. And now for the reason why the Toronto Raptors lost the game last night, and there were two big factors. The first was the perimeter defense. They were allowing the Cleveland Cavaliers to get into the paint on the pick and roll. There was scoring aplenty in the paint. Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland would come off of a screen, enter the lane with their defender in a trailing position, and then it would be a 2-on-1 versus Jakob Poeltl or Bruno Fernando, and it would end up with usually a lob dunk. There were tons of lobs, tons of creation by the guards of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Ty Jerome was very strong in a backup role. He was able to carve up the Raptors defense off of the bench. And Donovan Mitchell, without the OG safety blanket, he went off. He had a very nice game. Yeah, they were able to get what they wanted, especially in the pick and roll. They have talented guards, they have talented bigs. What does that mean? You are going to run a ton of pick and rolls. And with the Raptors' perimeter defense not being really up to snuff, the guards were getting into the lane. It was not a pretty sight to watch Donovan Mitchell stroll into the paint, possession after possession after possession. And then off of the bench, Caris LeVert, more of the same from him. He was able to get free, and he mostly created for himself, but the perimeter defense was also very poor in that area. So tons of improvements need to be made on the defensive side of the ball, particularly the perimeter defense. As I mentioned in my season overview, I believe that that's going to be a weakness for this team, and it was last night. And the second big reason for the loss was that the Toronto Raptors were not able to shift the Cleveland Cavaliers defense much at all. Almost everything that the Raptors had was bottled up, especially in the half court. They were not able to get to the rim. And part of that is because of the defense of Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen, and also even Donovan Mitchell had a strong defensive game. Scotty Barnes was having a lot of difficulty, and I guess we'll just go right into his stat line because it kind of dovetails nicely into the last point. He is the main creator when he is on the floor, and the team kind of goes as he goes. And he did not have a very good night. He finished with 9 points on 14 shots, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 turnovers. So not a good evening for him. And a lot of that can be attributed to the play of Evan Mobley, who is a very good defender, gave Scotty Barnes all sorts of problems, but also Scotty did not seem to have his mojo going. I don't know exactly how to describe it. Even when he would get into the paint and use a flip shot or go off glass, a lot of the stuff that we've seen drop for him. So he would get to his spot and take the shot, and it just simply would not go in. It was a bad night for him. It was also a very bad night for Jakob Poeltl, who those two I've been kind of singing their praises in the preseason, and in the season preview I was saying that those two players I expect them to be good players for the Toronto Raptors, and both were not up to snuff last night. Jakob Poeltl, 6 points in 26 minutes, 9 rebounds, 2 assists, 0 steals, 0 blocks, but most importantly, 5 turnovers. And I mentioned this in the preseason, is that Jakob Poeltl has had a turnover issue. And part of that is because he is being tasked with helping run the Raptors offense. They are giving him the ball at the top of the key in the high post in various areas, and he has been kind of shaky there, to be honest. One of the biggest things that I've noticed from him, and one of the biggest problems, has been his ability to simply get the ball to the ball handler in the open court. So simply just making a simple pass to a ball handler on the break, not even on the break, just to get the ball inbounded, has been a struggle for him. We've seen many times when he throws it behind a player, sort of in an odd spot, not leading his passes. It's just been messy. He needs to get a lot better, especially if he wants those on-ball reps. If he wants to be making reads with the ball, I'm sure that is empowering for him, and the team wants him to succeed there. He has to be smarter with the ball. 5 turnovers is not going to cut it, especially when he's not dribbling all that much. He's simply holding the ball and making passes. They're not asking him to do that much, and 5 turnovers is a worrying sign. I could go on more about kind of how Scottie Barnes and Jakob Poeltl struggled last night. I could expound on those two things. I'm not going to. I think if you watch the game, you know what I'm talking about. It was an ugly game from those two. Why don't we break up the negativity with a ray of light? That ray of light being Grady Dick, who was very fun to watch in the season opener. Grady Dick had 16 points on 5 for 13 shooting. He was 2 of 6 from 3, 2 rebounds, 1 assist, and 2 blocks. He had 2 blocks all of last season. So having 2 blocks in the first game is a very encouraging sign. And if you watch the game, you will have noticed that he has leveled up as an athlete. I classified him in my deep dive this past offseason as an average athlete, a guy who has good speed in the open court and can do certain things like finish at the rim pretty well, but I did not really see his burst, especially his vertical leap, being so explosive. And he had one very exciting possession where Darius Garland got Grady Dick on his hip. It looked like he was going to get past Grady, and he put up what he thought would be an uncontested layup. Grady Dick backpedaled, exploded off of his feet, and just blocked it into the first row. I was gobsmacked at that. I don't think anybody who covers the team really expected that from him. He had another block where he blocked, I believe it was a jump shot, but that was the jump off of the page moment. He had another one where he drove to the rim. He wasn't able to finish, but on the rebound, he jumped off of the baseline. So on his original drive, he went out of bounds, but he came back into the play, jumped up, grabbed the rebound, and then put it back in. It was another example of his explosiveness. And last but not least, in fact, saving the best for last, the most exciting play of the night by any player was Grady Dick's dribble drive from the left corner. Dean Wade bit on his pump fake and over-contested, and Grady Dick blew past him, jumped in the air, did an up and under move around 2 shot blockers, and floated it into the rim. It was beautiful. And that was probably the highlight of the night, especially if you're a Raptors fan. That jumped off the page. Very happy to see that, and if Grady Dick can be that kind of athlete, the sky is the limit for him. He could be a very potent offensive player, and I'm very happy to see the strides that he's taken in preseason and last night specifically. Moving along, Ochai Agbaji had a pretty quiet night. He was the guy tasked with guarding Donovan Mitchell. I don't think he had a particularly effective night. He only took 1 shot in 25 minutes. That's not going to cut it. He did have 6 rebounds, a steal, and a block, and the block was actually quite nice on Ty Jerome, but if he wants to play significant minutes, he needs to chip in on the offensive end. I can understand he is a complementary player, and if Scottie Barnes is having a difficult time creating, he is going to have a difficult time getting shots up. So I sort of understand it from that perspective, but I don't know, get on the offensive glass, get putbacks, do something. You have to be able to contribute more than just 1 shot attempt, which he did make. So, small victories. Moving on to the bench, I was pleasantly surprised with a couple of players. Chris Boucher had a great game on the offensive end, at least. He was extremely hot from three, 4 for 5. He had 18 points. He kind of kept the Raptors afloat when they went to the bench. Although I will mention, kind of call out Darko for putting in a full bench lineup, which kind of sunk the Raptors in the second quarter. They never quite recovered from that. But Chris Boucher did have a good night. 18 points, 2 rebounds, a steal, and a block. If Chris Boucher has it going, he is not shy. He will pull the trigger and shoot a bunch of threes. And tonight it was completely justified. The Raptors needed offense, and he helped to provide it. But we're kind of burying the lead here. I want to get to what I'm excited to talk about, which is Jamal Shead. Jamal Shead built off of his impressive preseason performance by having a great game off of the Toronto Raptors bench. He had 10 points on 7 shots. He made a 3. He was 1 for 4 from 3. Drew a bunch of fouls. Had 4 assists, some of them very impressive, a steal and a block, and 2 turnovers. But overall, I mean, this guy is really showing that he belongs at this level. And it's very early, 1 game into the season, but he looks like a player. And what I am most impressed with is his understanding of the game. And this was a forte of his in college. Payans were written about him and his competitiveness, his drive, but also just his ability to run the point is impressing me. He can get into the lane and find other players. He is trying to make plays. He's putting pressure on the rim. He's trying to score. He's making very good reads when he gets into the paint. Just very impressed with him. And on defense, he's a dog. He's getting up into guys. He had Darius Garland in hell in the second half of the game. Darius Garland on 1 possession kept trying to screen Jamal Shead off of him. He gave it up to Sam Merrill, but then Jamal Shead ran over to Sam Merrill and locked him up too. It was unbelievable. Just the amount of fight that Jamal Shead has inside of him. I am impressed, and I would love to see more of him. If that comes at the expense of the next guy I'm going to talk about, so be it. Davion Mitchell had a mediocre 2. I'm just going to say not a good game. I have talked about it over and over and over again. He's not a very good scorer. He had 8 points on 10 shots. 3 assists, but most importantly, 5 turnovers. Just not a good night for him. I didn't really notice him on defense, like to the extent that Jamal Shead was making a difference. He did have 2 steals, which is worth mentioning, but I don't know, man. I'm kind of just looking at Jamal Shead and saying like, maybe this is the guy that should win that battle. But if Emmanuel Quickley is out for any period of time, we're probably going to see both of those players play minutes. But yeah, Davion Mitchell has to be better offensively. Broken record alert. Bruno Fernando made the team. He is on the roster, which I didn't really agree with, but he didn't play that poorly last night. He played better than he usually does. Yeah, he had a dream shake on Evan Mobley and then grabbed the offensive rebound. He kind of missed, but he grabbed the offensive rebound, put it back in. That was a pretty impressive play. Defensively, he still doesn't quite know where to be. He's not very good guarding the pick and roll. I don't think we need to go too in depth on his minutes, but yeah, he had an okay game, I suppose. Jonathan Mogbo had a pretty nifty game. He came in a little later. He was part of the 3rd string unit that the Raptors put in when the game was out of reach, and he had a nice game. He had a 3. He had a nice sequence where he had a steal and then he drew a shooting foul. Yeah, he looked good. I like when he runs the fast break. I think a player with his size and ball handling ability should be very good in the open court, and he was. He had 7 points and a steal in just 11 minutes. No rebounds, but I liked what I saw from him. Last up, we'll talk Jamison Battle. Jamison Battle was also part of the 3rd string unit that checked into the game after the game was out of reach. And surprise, surprise, he made some threes. Yep, he shot 2 for 4 from the field. All of his shots came from 3, and he made 2 of them for 6 points. The guy just continues to shoot the ball very well. He also had a nifty play where he got a nice assist to Chris Boucher. It wasn't a real assist because Chris Boucher was fouled and shot free throws, but it was a nice play regardless. Yeah, I think that he could be a rotation player, especially for this team, and especially if the Raptors continue to be banged up. He just makes shots. But that's essentially the game. I will say that last night was not a great showcase for the Raptors system on either end. The Cavaliers are a good opponent. They have good vets. They have good defensive big men. They have a good bench. They're just a good team. And when the Toronto Raptors are undermanned, missing RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickley for the second half of the game, they got outmatched. And it's not surprising, but I was disappointed by how they lost. 30 points at home, season opener. You just have to show more pride than that. And talking about the system, I have been wondering what the deal is with the Toronto Raptors defensive system. They want to put a lot of pressure on the ball. I don't know if they have the personnel to be able to do that. Of course, Jamal Shed and Davion Mitchell and Ochai Agbaji, those guys can do it. But when you see guys like Grady Dick and Scotty Barnes even trying to get up really high on players, it just has not really been working. It did not work for them last night. Scotty Barnes got blown past a number of times, coming out very high. I just don't know if that is the correct system to run for the personnel that is on the team. But it's still very early days, and perhaps they haven't mastered what Darko wants them to do. So I'm going to keep an open mind, but again, looked kind of shaky last night. Next game the Toronto Raptors are going to be playing is against the Philadelphia 76ers on Friday. They will be playing in Toronto, and there is some injury news for the 76ers. We do not know the status of Joel Embiid or Paul George. Both of them are banged up at the moment. The 76ers are being very cagey about Joel Embiid's status. And of course, Paul George had that knee-on-knee collision in the preseason, and there's no structural damage, but it's still very sore. So we'll see if they make their season debuts there. If they don't, the Toronto Raptors have a chance. The 76ers got obliterated by the Milwaukee Bucks last night. It was a pretty ugly game for them. They didn't look like they had very much firepower. Maxey was asked to do a ton of the heavy lifting, so there was a lot of shot attempts from him. The Toronto Raptors are obviously, as we just saw, not a team that you can just pencil in the win column, even if they're facing a depleted team. They are going to have to work their tails off to try and come away with a victory, but I think it will be a little bit more attainable than last night, where they were facing a mostly healthy Cleveland Cavaliers team. Joel Embiid is a big loss for them if he doesn't play. Paul George, ditto. I would not be totally surprised if the Toronto Raptors bounced back from that ugly loss against the Cleveland Cavaliers. It was a punch in the mouth. Maybe they respond by playing a lot harder and tougher. We'll have to see. But that's the video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you were able to take something away from that. And if you have any comments, if you were disappointed in the Raptors' loss, if you saw any performances that you want to mention, please let me know in the comments here and on Twitter, where you can reach me at Raps Report. And as always, thank you for tuning in to Raptors Report, your source for in-depth Raptors content.